So it is my wonderful honor and Jessica's wonderful honor today to be with the one and only Assemblywoman Selena Torres.
The youngest Assemblywoman in the state of Nevada.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jessica. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, so for those who don't know, I've known Selena since she was like a little kid. Like we were just talking a few minutes ago, probably since she was 12.
Yeah, I think it's been since I was about 12 years old.
And through her debate career as a forensics and speech and debate student in high school, and her walk for graduation, and a year early on top of that.
Yeah, I remember you actually used to work at the high school that I attended.
Right. Yeah, I replaced one of the teachers, so I actually got to see graduate, which was amazing.
Did you, Selena, always know that you wanted to become an educator like your mom?
So my mom is an educator, and she's been an educator in the district for as long as I can remember, essentially. And I, growing up, I remember I always thought I wanted to be a teacher or a lawyer. That was always the two different things that I said I was going to do, either go into law or go into teaching. And I guess I get to live the best of both worlds because I get to be a teacher and work a little bit with law at the same time. So I guess I did all right.
Yes, you
so
did.
Was it supposed to be all your family going into teaching? Because you've gone into teaching, your sister's gone into teaching, your brother's going into teaching.
I guess we just loved growing up in the school because at the time, my mom, my dad worked a lot at during the evenings, and so we were always with mom. And so if there was even a staff development day, we were at school with our mom, or we were if we were sick, there was really no option. You were either at our own school or we were at school because childcare, we didn't have access to childcare other than our parents. And so we were basically always at school. In the summer, we would go to school. My mom would even give us summer schools. So I guess it just it was always it was a good feeling to be at school. We enjoyed school, so maybe that's why all of us decided we wanted to go into education and work with kids.
So what made you decide to run for office?
I think, as an educator, I think that we see a lot of different ways that education our kids' lives, but we also see a lot of different ways that other things impact our kids' lives. And we recognize that we can make small micro changes in our classroom, but macro change is when you think systemically, but micro changes being the consideration that, we can make the change for our 150 kids every single year, 100 kids every year. But as a lawmaker, we have the ability to make changes for a lot larger group. I don't know that necessarily that micro or macro changes impacts people more or less. I just think that, as a lawmaker, we get to change some of the things that I think we struggle with in our classrooms. We get to change the ways in which the system treats our kids. And I think that's been truly a blessing as a lawmaker.
Do you think, since you became an assembly person, that more people at your school approach you as a liaison towards making those changes?
I definitely do think that since I became a lawmaker, my colleagues look to me for just advice on how to navigate the bureaucratic system that is education. So I think for a lot of my colleagues, they lean on me to help provide that support. But at the end of the day, when I'm in the classroom, I look at myself just as any other educator, and I'm trying to navigate the complex systems and bureaucracies that all teachers are dealing with. And, sometimes really my biggest concern is just if I'm going to make it to the end of the class to use the restroom or not, just like any other educator. So when I'm at school, I really try to turn my teacher on. I'm really just an educator.
Now, what did you learn from being in the assembly the first time?
I think that from being a legislator and serving in the assembly the first time, what I really learned to do was to listen to other people. And sometimes that means listening more than you talk. So I know we always joke about in a teacher meeting, you have the teacher that's super loud. And sometimes I think what I've learned is to just listen to what everybody's doing and then make my own decision about what I'm going to be doing in my own classroom.
Now, the nice thing is you do not have an opponent this year. So you are Assemblywoman-elect once again.
Yes, that is correct. I'm Assemblywoman-elect.
So how does it feel not to have a campaign to worry about?
You know, it's definitely a big like stress relief to not have to worry about my campaign. Nonetheless, I think that this election is still going to be really important for a number of other races. So even though I might not have my own campaign to focus on, I have a lot of colleagues that are going to have tougher races. So I'm just planning on really allocating all my resources to helping out my colleagues that are going to have tougher races. Additionally, I think, we have the presidential year, so my district needs to get out and vote. So even if I don't have a campaign, I need my constituency to go out there and vote this year because we have the presidential race. We have a number of congressional races. So it's really important that we have representation that stands with the values that I stand for and that stands with the values that my community wants to see reflected in the legislature. And so I really hope that I get to help my community get out and vote this year.
How do you balance, we touched on, you put your educator hat on, and when you're in the classroom, you're in the classroom. So what does your day look like as soon as your contract time is over? How much time is spent reviewing policies, attending meetings? Do you get to have a life outside?
If you were to ask my family, they'd say not really. But I think outside of the classroom, so my contract is till 3:36. So I start meetings usually around 4 o'clock, sometimes 3:45. There's a Starbucks that's super close to my school building. So it makes it very easy for me to just go from one to the other. So as soon as the school day's over, I'm usually in a meeting. And then I am in a meeting until 5:30, 6 o'clock. And then at that point, then I can go home. And usually if I have a lot of emails that day, I have to review those and go through those. Other times I might be more focused on my classwork, whatever it is that I need to do for my role as an educator. Most of the time, though, it is spent doing like policy things that I need to catch up on, reading the news, which I think is a really important part of like making strong policy decisions, watching what's going on in other committees, which is just going to be a really important part of understanding what happened next session. But I think once you get into the routine of it, it just kind of becomes normal life. I was really happy when the caucus was over because my life got a little bit less busy when the caucus was over. Mm-hmm. So I expect, in October, November, once we have the presidential races and, the general races really picking up, I expect we'll get even busier than it was before.
And I know from just talking to you, Mom, you were very popular during the caucus.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I know like a number of the presidential candidates, they want to meet with elected officials, and they definitely want to meet with young, diverse elected officials. And, as a young woman of color, I think that for a lot of candidates, it was important that they took the opportunity to speak to me as I represent a really diverse community here in Nevada as well. And so I was really fortunate to be at the table and to get to help represent my constituency in that capacity.
That's awesome.
Now, what do you see as the difference being a teacher and being a student? Like, what do you see as like the biggest struggle for CCSD in education in Nevada?
I think that the biggest struggle in education has always just been a lack of resources. And some of that, I think, is lack of resources. Other of it is just like misappropriation of resources, like where we spend the money is really important. Like just, and that's an administrative and district decisions on, are we spending the money on kids and teachers and how? I remember my first few years teaching at a high school in East Las Vegas. We had textbooks that were older than I was. Like the textbooks are probably like over 25 years old. And it was ridiculous to me. They were in poor shape. I couldn't really use them in my classroom. I didn't even have enough textbooks for the amount of kids that I had in my classroom. And, I think that was a number of reasons. It was lack of resources and a lot of time being spent not investing in our kids or in our classrooms. And we see that trickle down. I think sometimes we are so busy investing in all of these programs and these expensive means of like improving education when that's not what impacts the classroom the most. We know that it's like our teachers and the resources that we have in our classroom that is really going to impact and drive educational change. it's not the latest and greatest systems with the coolest names from the programs from out of state.
I noticed, and I think given the situation we're in, being on lockdown, there's a huge digital divide in certain areas of Clark County. So with cuts coming, the governor has stated there's going to be cuts. What role will you play in trying to make sure CCSD doesn't face cuts, like major ones?
As a state, right now, I can say that the Nevada governor has declared that, we are in a state of emergency. We know we're going to see big financial cuts. I think right now we're projecting, they're projecting the latest was like to make 4% cuts like across the board to all state departments, which will impact all communities. And all professions. It's not just going to be education that's impacted. I think that in 2008, we really saw that education was hit hard by the last economic recession. I think, our role as legislators is to ensure that the state education is funded and it's funded where it needs to be. I understand that we're going to have to make hard decisions next session. We're going to be looking at, are we funding this program or this program, and what's more important? At the end of the day, I truly do believe that education and expanding access to education is crucial for community and creating equity. And unless we are able to do that, we're just going to create more barriers for other communities. And so I hope that, we can come to a consensus where we recognize and are able to really value education during the legislative session. But, I'm not going to, I don't want to minimize the issue. I know that we're going to have to make cuts, and it's going to be hard for everyone.
So since we were talking about the cuts and everything that's happening with the closing, how are you handling the digital divide right now? How are you able to teach your kids? Or are you having any luck?
I think like most educators, I'm definitely struggling. I think a lot of my students might have access to technology, but we know that being in the classroom is different than just being on a computer. That's why I think for some of us, the social distancing is difficult, because having a conversation with a friend on the phone or over the computer is so different from being able to sit down and have lunch with them for 30 minutes. And so we know that this is impacting our kids. And, quite honestly, in the classroom, I just think about how many times I go over and talk to students about oh, great job, good job on this, or hey, you missed number 2, or oh, this was supposed to be 4 sentences. Can you add another one? The other 3 were great. So I just think about that attention, and we talk about relationship building, and one of the big things for relationship building with students is teacher attention. Our teacher attention is at a minimum when we're virtual, and there's no way for us to truly maximize it. We can go out of our way and create Zoom meetings, reach out to families, but even then it's not the same amount of attention that our students are accustomed to, and I don't think we can expect that our students or teachers are going to gain as much from it. However, at the end of the day, I like to think that the most important thing is our student health and our teacher health. And I think that is accomplished by distance learning. So while I think that I'm getting less work, I know I'm getting less work, I'm getting less feedback, I'm getting less student engagement than I ever have before. At the end of the day, I know that, my students have a higher chance of being healthy as a result of distance learning. And I hope that, if they're able to focus on English class during this time, they're able to focus on their own, personal and mental health.
Right. And I completely agree with you. I think nothing can ever equal the presence of a teacher in the room, right? Computers don't. This conversation, this podcast would even be so much more heartfelt and strong if we could all be in the room together. However, I think our educators are going to take some of these tools and hopefully incorporate them when we can see each other again back into the classroom. Even my husband, he's a kindergarten teacher, and he's like, oh, I'm totally going to use, what is it? Not Kahoot. Flipgrid. He just shouted it. And yeah, he can be involved in my podcast from the other room too. But Flipgrid, he really likes Flipgrid, and I know my children have learned some different websites where they can build beats and become DJs. That's cool. Again, I am an active parent. I have access to technology. So I feel really sorry for the kids that school is their home. And I think about
A lot
them.
of kids, it's just not equitable, right? Like, even when we think about the gaps in education, who's going to have the biggest gap in education? Is it going to be the kid with like the parent that's an educator? Because like I think of myself, I would have been fine if we didn't go to school. Like I would have missed school. There probably would have been a few gaps in my education system. But my mom was an educator. She would have made sure that I was still like
Learning.
Work and coursework, and she would have been active in that process. But for a lot of parents, they don't necessarily have that. They don't have the support.
They don't know.
Yeah. And it's not that they're bad parents. It's that right now they don't have the tools to provide that quality education to their kids. And a computer is not the solution. We know that just because I buy an app, it doesn't make me smarter. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have a quality education. We need that human-to-human interaction. That's how people learn. And I think we're going to see that the biggest gap that we're going to have is maybe with the community that already has that gap, right? It's the community that maybe doesn't have parents that have a college education or don't have parents that are home all the time because they need to go to work. Or in this crisis, they have maybe younger siblings that they have to take care of all the time. Or they have parents that have recently become unemployed as a result of this crisis. And so they have a lot of other like personal stress. So I think that our gap is going to get significantly bigger in some areas, and there's not going to be that same gap of education for other students. So I really hope as a community we work together to find ways to close that gap when we come back, whenever that is.
Absolutely.
All right. So we know you're actively involved in the community.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. One of the big things we know is like the Cesar Chavez Day celebrations that you and your family spearhead.
Yes, I know. We've been doing the Cesar Chavez Day Festival. This year was supposed to be our 7th year, and the festival is usually celebrated at the end of March, and we had April 18th all scheduled, but that's going to be postponed as a result of everything else going on.
So is there any new community ventures that you're starting or spearheading besides for that, or what other stuff? Yeah.
So I'm an active member of the Nevada Hispanic Legislative Caucus. So I've really recently been working with our caucus on the COVID-19 task force, and we're kind of spearheading some efforts to ensure that the Latino community and the immigrant community has access to resources during this crisis. Some of that has to do with Spanish messaging. Other parts of that has to really just be doing with ensuring that there's recommendations that are going to help meet the needs of the communities that have really the most need and the most vulnerable. And so we're working with a group of medical professionals, medical experts on creating that. We're also working on creating supports for COVID-19 patients, which is something that I'm really passionate about, because if you can't leave your house, it's going to be very hard for people that might not have access to groceries, where grocery stores don't necessarily deliver. If groceries are already hard to come by, it's going to be extremely hard for families that are living paycheck to paycheck to really afford the additional fee of delivery service and things like that. So we're creating a few different partnerships so that we can help families navigate the complexities of living today.
That's really good.
All right. Since we know you're involved in everything, do we see a President Torres somewhere down the road?
Governor Torres.
Well, we'll take it off yet. But go ahead.
I said, what's your ultimate dream?
Right now I'm really happy just serving the state of Nevada in whatever way that I can. I'm really excited to continue serving as the Nevada State Assemblywoman, and I'm hoping to be in the legislature for a while more.
We hope so too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you think any other family member is going to run for office?
I think I definitely have family members that should consider running for office. We've definitely talked about it before. I know that they're waiting for the right seat and the right time. It's a really hard decision to run for office. It's a hard decision for an individual, but then it's also a hard decision for a family. But I know that my family is very vocal about what policies they want to see passed.
Yes, they are. And in a good way.
Yes. All right.
In a great way. And they're actually really proactive. I know my mom actually came out to testify on legislation last session.
Oh.
Your mom is a sweetheart. She carried me when I started teaching. She made sure that I didn't like end up crying every day. Yeah, you can't see it, but Jessica was like having a little baby thing. She was pretty much babying me. So like she made sure I survived the time I taught at your school when you were a senior, and so to make sure I survived the rest of the year. So
it was I'm sure the first year teaching for everybody though is like the most challenging, but I think it gets better as you go. Fortunately.
Yeah, that was like a rude awakening for me, going from a middle class, predominantly white school to go to a Hispanic class that had like 3 or 4 teachers already that year. So I love your mom dearly, and I love your family. I appreciate everything your family has done for the community and for education. So
yeah, your philosophies are very much needed in politics, and you have big fans from elevating educators.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I think that you guys are doing some phenomenal work, making sure that we have educator voices that are a part of the discussion. Legislators really can't do their job without your voices, and I think all too often we do it without teacher voices. So it's important that we have more educators that are involved in the political process and that are participating and really vocalizing and being loud. And that's not what educators are known for. Educators are really known for kind of just being quiet and getting our work done in our little micro community in our schools. But we have to go outside of that sometimes, because that's how, otherwise we're going to continue to allow for our systems to not understand necessarily the work we do and how it impacts our community.
all right, so before we go, we have a series of 3 questions, and I don't know if Jessica remembers some or not.
Oh gosh, I think the first one, oh goodness, is it Harry Potter?
No, it's not what house. It's describe your perfect school.
Oh yeah, describe your perfect school. Your dream school.
I think my dream school would have all the supplies I needed in my classroom all the time. It would have like an endless supply of pencils and books, access to books, and whatever book that I needed would probably be the most essential. And like a good class size of like 25 to 28 students would be ideal. And have just like really the whole family involved, because I think that schools are really community centers, and if we can continue to make schools community centers, then we'll allow for our communities to be prosperous.
All right, Jessica, do you remember the second question?
Nope.
What buzzword annoys you? Like, if you can get rid of one education buzzword, what would it be?
There's so many.
I like have things at the tip of my tongue, and I'm trying to think of what it is.
Can we tell you ones that we've heard?
Yes, I want to hear yours.
So rigor has been used.
NEPF.
Oh, any acronyms like NEPF. That's a good one.
SLG is a trigger word for me.
SLG is the trigger word.
Pre and post observation. I'm filling out the paperwork that you need to do the pre and post observation. Those are definitely trigger words for me. What else do you guys have on your list?
What else have we done, Ryan?
Oh,
Engagement. Academic discourse.
Oh, academic discourse is definitely a good one. I'm wondering what discourse in my class is non-academic. I've been trying to find it.
They're talking.
Differentiated instructions.
Differentiation.
Differentiated. I think this year on there had to have been at some point station. The word stations. Standard instruction. I don't think I've ever planned a lesson that was like not aligned to some standard. So.
All right, so here's the last question. You cannot use your mom as the answer for this.
Okay.
Because I know the answer would be your mom. Who is your favorite teacher of all time, real or fake?
I think, well, I have a real answer and I have a fake answer. Which one?
You have both.
Oh,
so my favorite teacher of all time has Miss Balaam. She was my 8th grade middle school health teacher. And she was just excellent. She was like really like pushed us to do well. Oh, I liked Miss Pribble too, though. She was my librarian in middle school. That was like a really like pivotal moment for me. She was my debate coach. So I think that was like important for me. And my favorite fantasy teacher our fake teacher was Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World.
I love Feeny.
Feeney was
Feeny.
Have you seen
and he was like, he was just funny enough, but he actually cared.
He was good.
He knew tough love.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice that ABC provided that for all of us.
And now it's available on Disney Plus, so if in the time of quarantine you need it again.
Thank you so much, Selena.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.